Her husband read the loan document 3 times. Then he put it away. He never told anyone why. 3 years later, he was dead. 6 years after that. That decision saved the farm. In 1886, 3 farms on Clara Vogt's road disappeared in 4 months. Not from fire, not from drought alone. From signatures. Signatures on loan documents that the farms couldn't honor when the rain stopped coming. Clara's farm was still standing, and her signature was supposed to be on one of those documents. 3 men had spent 2 years making sure of it. Her name was Clara Vogt, 41 years old, widow, 120 acres in Custer County, Nebraska. 3 men had told her the farm was finished without a loan. She had told none of them anything back. She just kept farming and waited to see who was right. 3 men, 2 years, 4 visits, an $800 loan, 10% interest. That was $80 a year. Before she grew a single thing, her neighbor to the north had already signed. So had the farm to the east and the one beyond that. She was the last one they hadn't got yet. Now here's the thing. The men who came to Clara's door, they weren't villains. In 1880, Nebraska was booming. The rains came. The crops were good. The land was rising in value every year. And the loan companies from New York and Boston sent their agents west with a pitch that made complete sense on a good year. Borrow against the land. Plant twice the acreage. Buy the equipment. Expand. And every farm on Clara's road that had borrowed in 1880 and 1881. For the first 5 years, they looked like the right decision. Every visible fact in 1882 said the loan was right. The rain had been generous. For now. But Clara had something the loan agent didn't. She had been watching her husband read that document 3 times. Put it back. He was not an educated man. He wasn't a lawyer. But he had said one thing. Once, quietly at this table. And she had never forgotten it. I don't want to farm for the bank. That was all. He died before the question came back to her. When it did, she already knew her answer. And in 6 years, the sky would confirm it. The prairie had been generous. Good years came in clusters, long enough for a man to believe the rain was permanent, long enough to sign his name on that belief. And the farms that had borrowed, they needed the rain every single year. Not most years, every year, because the interest didn't stop running in a dry August. It ran at 10% whether the corn came up or not. That was the part nobody said plainly at the fence line. Nobody said it because in 1882, nobody believed the rain would stop. The loan agent's name was Russell Dean. He worked for the American Loan and Trust Company out of Lincoln. He was not a bad man. He came to Clara's fence line 3 times in 2 years, each time with a different neighbor who had already borrowed as proof that sensible people made this choice. On the 3rd visit, he said it plainly. Mrs. Vogt, I want to be honest with you. A farm this size, with no capital to expand, cannot compete with what's coming. The farms that invest now will be the ones still standing in 10 years. The ones that don't, I have seen this before. They fall behind and they don't catch up. I'm not selling you debt. I'm selling you the right to stay in the race. He believed that. He wasn't lying. The farms that borrowed in 1880 did expand, did buy equipment, did plant more. For 5 years, they looked exactly like what he promised. Clara's neighbor to the north, a man named August Feller, said it at the grain exchange that fall. Not cruelly. Just with the certainty of a man who has already decided she's running 120 acres with no capital, no husband, no loan. By spring, she's either selling or borrowing. There is no third option. By November, the loan company sent its fourth letter to Clara's door. It laid out the terms again, and then, in the last paragraph, it said something new. That land values in Custer County were projected to keep rising. That waiting only increased what she would eventually need. That was the second stage. Not a threat, just arithmetic designed to feel inevitable. Clara read the fourth letter. She put it down. She sat with her hands flat on the table the way she always did when she needed to think clearly. Then she reached for the record book. Not the loan document. The record. The one she had been keeping since the week after her husband died. Every dollar in, every dollar out, every cost, every yield, in her own hand, with her own pencil, with her own name on every page. She was not reading it to decide whether to borrow. She had already decided. She was reading it to understand exactly what she had, without anyone else's money. Harriet Soule had the farm on the south side of Clara's land. She had watched Clara refuse the loan 4 times and was trying to understand it. She came to the fence line one morning in February. She noticed the pencil behind Clara's ear before she noticed anything else. She asked, "Are you certain about this? Fella's already got a new corn crib. The Ewald brothers put in new equipment last fall. You're getting smaller while everyone else is getting bigger." Clara looked at her field. Then she said, "Fella's corn crib costs him $9 a year whether he fills it or not." Harriet was quiet. Then she said what she had actually walked over to say. What if the bad year comes and you're too small to survive it? Clara looked at the field a long time. Then I fail on my own terms. But I will not pay a man in Boston 10% of everything this land grows for the right to call it mine. Harriet stood at the fence for a while. Then she asked quietly, "How are you doing it?" The loan was not the problem. The problem was what happened to the loan in a bad year. Because the loan companies, they were smart men. They had done their math. The math said, Nebraska land is rising. Borrow against the future. The future will pay. And they were right. In a good year. What nobody had asked, what nobody at any fence line on Clara's road had asked, was the simpler question, what happens to the farm in the 1 year the future doesn't pay? Clara had asked it, because her husband had asked it without using those words, just by reading the note 3 times and putting it back. She was asking it for him. She did not just refuse the loan. Refusing the loan with no plan is not courage. It is just a different kind of failure. What Clara did, before Russell Dean ever appeared at her fence, was ask the farm a different question. Not, how much can this land produce? But, what is the least this land needs to produce to still be mine next year? She made the farm smaller, not because she was giving up, because she was building something nobody else on that road was building. In the winter of 1882, 2 years into the refusal, Clara sat at this table and asked herself the things she had been trying not to ask. Was she being wise? Or was she just afraid? Those 2 things can look exactly the same from the outside. She was not sure that night which one it was. She checked her numbers. Not because they were wrong, because she needed them to be right. What the numbers showed, even in the worst year she could find in the county records, this farm would clear the floor. Not by much, but enough. She checked the east fence post every evening before she went inside, the one that touched Fella's land, not to measure herself against him, just to know where she ended and where the pressure began. Then she went in. This is the thing nobody at the American Loan and Trust Company had put in their model. And it is the thing that would decide everything in the summer of 1886. Every evening, after the fence post, she came inside, took the pencil from behind her ear, and updated the record. And at the bottom of each year's page, she drew a line. And below the line, she wrote one number, the floor. The minimum the farm needed to still be hers the following spring. 4 years in, she had it, without a loan, without Eastern capital, without anyone's permission. Most farmers knew what the farm could earn. She knew what it needed to earn, just to survive the year. That is a different number. She wrote it at the bottom of every page. Nobody else was writing it. The summer of 1886 arrived without water. June passed dry. July passed drier. In Custer County, Clara's county, less than 4 inches of rain fell between June and September. The average was 9. You need 7 to bring a corn crop in. The loan companies had not built that into their model. The model was built on the years the loans were sold. August Feller's corn showed the curl first. By mid-July, he knew the harvest was going to be a third of what he needed. His interest payment was due in October. His note needed a full harvest to cover. He had a third of a harvest and the same debt. 3 farms in Clara's township applied for extensions in August. The loan company granted them at a higher rate. The clock did not stop. It ran faster. Clara Vogt's corn showed the curl in the 3rd week of July. Her smaller acreage, the farm she had built for survival, not expansion, showed the same damage as every other field on that road. She knelt between the rows. The Drought did not know she had refused the loan. It arrived the same for her as for August Feller, as for the Ewell brothers, as for everyone. And for one moment, kneeling in the cracked earth, with the leaves curling around her, she felt it. Not panic, something quieter and worse. The question she had never been able to fully answer. What if refusal was just a different path to the same place? She stayed in the field, let herself sit with that question. Then she stood up, walked to the east fence post, checked it, went inside, opened the record book. Her floor was $198. Even at a third of normal yield, she would clear $214. $16 above the floor. Not comfortable, but hers. The clock was not running against her. August Feller renegotiated his note on August 14th, 1886. Extension granted, at 12% instead of 10%. 3 farms in the county did not get extensions. They were transferred to the loan company by November. Clara Vogt covered her costs from the partial harvest and 2 heifers she had kept for exactly this kind of summer. Same drought, same county, same sky, different floor. The autumn came. Clara's farm came with it. Smaller than the farms around her, quieter, and carrying no renegotiated note. August Feller came to the east fence post in October, not with Russell Dean. Alone. He stood at the post she checked every evening. He looked at her field for a long time. Then he said, "How did you know? Not what the farm could earn. The other number, the number you needed." Clara said, "My husband read the loan document 3 times and put it back. He never explained why. After he was gone, I read it myself, and I understood. He had asked the question nobody else was asking. What does this farm need, in the worst year, to still be ours? Not what can it earn? What does it need? That is the number I built the farm around. I didn't know it would work until this summer." She paused. The record shows it worked. Feller looked at his fields for a while. Then he said, Next year I'm going to calculate that number. He walked back across his land. He did not apologize. Clara Vogt folded the unsigned promissory note, the one she had read and never signed, and put it back in the drawer, the same drawer where her husband had put it. Then she walked to the east fence post, checked it. Then she went inside. The loan companies were not wrong about Nebraska. The land was good. The rain usually came. The math worked in a normal year. They had done everything right for the world they had data on. What they hadn't measured was what happens to a farmer in the 1 year the world doesn't cooperate, because farmers don't get to wait for a better year. They are in the field every year, and in Custer County, Nebraska, between 1885 and 1892, more than 300 farms were lost to the loan companies, not because the farmers were foolish, because they had built their operations for the ceiling and the floor came up to meet them. The same road, the same farms, the same rain that didn't come. What changed was who was still on it. By 1890, Clara had 140 acres. 20 of them had been Fella's. She had bought them when he had to sell to reduce his note. She had helped Harriet So calculate her own floor before Harriet signed anything with anyone. And the farm, the one the 3 men said was finished, was still producing. The field doesn't care what the loan document says. It only records what you planted and whether you are still there to plant it again. And after that, the farmers who survived Custer County were not the ones who borrowed the most. They were the ones who knew their floor. This story draws from documented history. Nebraska's farm mortgage debt grew by more than 300% between 1880 and 1887. More than 300 farms in Custer County, Nebraska, were foreclosed or transferred to Eastern mortgage companies between 1885 and 1892. Nebraska farm mortgage interest rates ran between 8 and 12% annually in the 1880s. The 1886 drought in central Nebraska was real and documented. Clara Vogt, August Fella, Russell Dean, and Harriet Soule are fictional characters placed inside this real historical record. The unsigned document is real in the sense that matters most. Someone chose not to sign it. The flaw is always real. Most people calculate what they could earn. A few calculate what they need to earn to still be there the following year. History remembers the farms that grew, but Nebraska was kept alive, in the years that counted, by the farmers who had built a floor into their plans before the bad year came. If you are the kind of person who asks the second question, not what could this produce, but what does it need to produce to survive, you already know why you're here. Have you ever refused something everyone told you to take? Not because you couldn't use it, but because you could see what it would cost you in a bad year? Tell me in the comments. The future rarely arrives all at once. Usually, it starts with one woman reading a document she will never sign, before sunrise. This is American soil.